I drove home from that week completely out of my 3-month-long dark night of the soul. I wished that my church community could have done for me what that week did for me, but they couldn't. I soon discovered that I wasn't alone in Billings, Montana. Several of my friends were traversing the same thing I was, so I created a local support group that continues to grow to this day. Members of our group, we've each put in significant work to understand what happened to us, and we strive to support each other with grace and a ministry of presence. We support each other across an entire spectrum of belief without any agenda of where individual faith journeys will end. In our group, regardless of what we each leave behind or the depths of the unknown we have traversed, as we each step forward into human experience with exploration and discovery, we are not alone. While for me, my process is ongoing and there are scars, with the help of others, my heart has healed. For me, my choice, rather than intertwining new vines and layers of meaning, I allow my transcendent, connecting, grace-filled experiences to exist in their purity, with curiosity and with gratitude. This work of supporting others, it's how I thrive now. In some ways, it links back to that moment, half a world away, sitting on a couch in a humble apartment living room, reading that journal entry. I strive to live my life with gratitude for the opportunity to participate in the lives of others with grace, with ministering presence, and to hold the hands of strangers. Thank you.
All right. Well, Anthony, that was super powerful and super beautiful. And we may have had a few people on the YouTube live stream. It looks like YouTube didn't like that we were resharing that talk in totality. I guess that might be a community violation, but I don't know. We meant to do good, and we were doing it with your permission. But let's just go ahead and continue. Anthony, what are your thoughts or reactions as you were watching that video?
So are we back live on Facebook then?
Yeah, we never left Facebook,
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, to a certain extent, what I did is I walked people through, rather than saying I experienced these things, I walked people through my experience. And in preparing my talk and in giving my talk, I actually relived some of those experiences, even though they were 5 to 6 years ago. And in great part, that's why they were so emotional for me. But I really wanted to share my journey in a way that would be safe for believing members to watch, that could connect with people who have experienced an existential crisis and other things. After my talk, the response that I received from these mostly never church member people in the audience was just overwhelming. A woman came up to me and shared that she was in existential faith crisis as well. She had grown up in a very conservative Baptist Protestant faith with an abusive spouse that she eventually divorced, and she ended up being not allowed to go to that church anymore because divorce is prohibited. And then that is what crashed her shelf, so she was in faith crisis. I had another person share with me that they experienced something similar with regard to their Catholic faith. I had one friend who was there explain that she had always grown up with this idea that she was going to get married and have children and live, in the house with the white picket fence. And as she got older, she went through an existential crisis about the meaning of everything and what was her purpose, because she had always thought that this is what God wanted her to do. And so I came to the realization even deeper that what I shared was to a certain extent connecting to the experiences of many people. I have one friend that was very appreciative that I walked people through what the experience of a situational suicidal ideation is and how people come about that, as well as disassociation, the experience of disassociation. So I thought that I was going to have a really bad vulnerability hangover after sharing my journey that vulnerable on stage, knowing that it was being videoed. But the response that I had from the people that were there in the audience, like I said, mostly never members of the church, was so touching to me. People I'd never met before that held me in their arms and cried, that there was no vulnerability hangover. I was just very grateful to be able to share that experience.
That's so powerful. What do you want to share with people about what it's like to do a TED Talk? I'm another person in the progressive or post-Mormon community who has given a TED Talk. I gave mine back in 2013, but it was hard, and it was nerve-wracking, and it was vulnerable, and it was stressful. Do you want to talk anything about that process of like writing the talk and revising the talk and practicing the talk and then how scary it is to actually deliver it?
Yeah, it's all of those. I mean, I've given presentations, business presentations in front of hundreds and thousands of people. Over the years in church, I've spoken at conferences, state conference, and served on the High Council, spoke in wards every month at different places around our state. I never felt adrenaline before giving a talk like I did with this one. It was pretty vulnerable and stressful. The process of writing the talk was painful in that it made me realize that some of these experiences that I had gone through, I hadn't fully processed, even in spite of all the work that I've done speaking with friends at sessions at Sunstone, doing podcast interviews, speaking at conferences like Thrive. In spite of all that, there were some things that I included in my talk that I hadn't totally processed. And so it was a very emotional journey just to go through writing it. And then condensing it from something that could easily be much longer than 17 and a half to 18 minutes long to have it be in that period of time. When you give a TED Talk, there's different ways that they suggest, but generally they want you to have a pretty good memorization of it, and they want you to have rehearsed it at least 60 to 100 times prior to giving it.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I rehearsed it over and over and over again, and every time I would give it, maybe there'd be 6 or 12 words that were different, and sometimes I said lie instead of lay, and so forth. But in the end, the vast majority of what I gave there was text that I wrote, rewrote, refined, and then rehearsed well over 100 times before I gave it. And even in spite of that, there was quite a bit of adrenaline that day that I gave it.
Yeah, I also had rehearsed it many, many times, but there's nothing like the lights are on, the timer's counting down, the audience is there. You know that you feel like you're carrying the stories of thousands or tens of thousands of your own people, and the pressure makes it so hard. Makes it so hard to not stutter or freeze or get confused or disoriented. At least that's how it was for me.
Yeah, I mean, I was concerned. Probably my biggest concern was that I would get so emotional that I wouldn't be able to be clear, that people couldn't understand what I was saying. So there were a few times in the talk that I paused to kind of try to gather myself so that I could continue to talk. There are some things that I would point out in the talk that maybe are explicitly apparent or maybe not. Like I mentioned earlier in this episode, I only used the word Mormon in the first sentence because I wanted to share that this was about my journey more than it was about Mormonism. I shared my experience of how much I loved the church and how enmeshed in my identity, the meaning that I attributed to my spiritual experiences were. My connections, my roles, my reputation, my community, it was all so completely enmeshed. And I worked on quite a few different metaphors for it, and where I ended up landing was the vines of attribution of meaning that I interlaced and intertwined around my heart, that grew into my heart and became one with my heart, so that people could understand that a faith crisis, at least an acute faith crisis, is just as much an identity crisis as a belief crisis. It's not like, changing gyms, or leaving your favorite recreational group or something like that. It's also enmeshed in your identity. I'd point out a few things that maybe aren't apparent. One is the parable of the Good Samaritan was significant because in the parable of the Good Samaritan, the Levite and the priest are the one that step aside and don't minister to the wounded traveler, and it's the apostates, the Samaritans actually, or those considered apostates by the Levite and the priest, who minister unto the wounded traveler. And in a recent episode you did with RFM, he talked about when he was in his faith crisis period, that it was interesting that it was actually the post-Mormons that were trying to help him figure out how to stay in the church, and it was the more literal believers that were just telling him that he ought to just leave. And I had some of those kinds of experiences too. As I was going through this, I've done an episode with Sunstone, a fireside discussion with Lindsay about faith transition work is often considered grief work. And that discussion really resonated with me when I was trying to understand how significant, at least for me, for how I'm built, to have people to talk to sit with my story. The words from Brene Brown about the ministry of presence and holding the hand of a stranger really stood out, as well as those who are trained in psychology would know that the process of active listening to someone who's processing grief and trauma, that in of itself, I understand, is very significant into helping people process and recover from grief and trauma. And so I wanted to include something else like that in there. I wanted to include that it's not explicit, but the heroes of my story are actually mostly women. My mother was my hero in providing for our broken family. The woman on the convert from my mission that asked me to read her journal entry of the day of her baptism, where I felt like I received a significant answer to my purpose in life, is a hero for me. Lindsay was a hero. Jera Lee was a hero. My friend Sarah, who co-leads our local Mormon Spectrum group.
Is that Bozeman or Billings? Is that Bozeman or Billings?
That's in Billings, Montana.
Okay.
Sarah Hughes Zabawa co-leads the group with me. She's a hero. And I wanted to point out that while I have friends and there are men that really helped me in my journey, in my story, in my TED Talk, my heroes are women. So I wanted to point that out too. I also, toward the end of my story, what I wanted to express, the underlying foundation, a significant part of my healing is the secular application of Buddhist type of principles, and not from a religious sense, but a secular sense. And part of that is to be able to sit without rushing to attribute meaning to things, and to sit with experiences of mystery and connection, with curiosity and gratitude, and just accepting the mystery and the wonder of those experiences. And so I wanted to communicate that as well. So there's a lot of underlying things that I was working to express in my TED Talk.
And when you were done, Anthony Miller, how satisfied were you? How happy were you? Were you disappointed? Were you nervous? What was it like when it was all over?
All of those things. The tendency for perfectionism in me was, I'm like, I said led to believe instead of I've always been led to believe. Those were anti-church lies, and I used lied down instead of laid down, and I was disappointed that I got so emotional. But once I started talking with people after I gave my talk, none of those things really mattered, because of the things that I was just overwhelmed with gratitude just for the opportunity. Those words, so that they're part of me. The purpose of my life is to live with gratitude for the opportunity to participate in the lives of others. And I got to do that day.
Yeah.
And that made it all worth it.
Good. What would you like to share about, so the video's been released for just a few days. What would you like to share about the responses and the reactions to the video so far that you haven't already shared, I guess?
Yeah, so far, I've just experienced an overwhelming experience of gratitude for the comments that people have shared, that they felt like they had experiences similar to mine, that they were appreciative that I did this, so it's something that they could share with friends and family, to express that their experiences are in some ways similar to mine. I've been really touched by my active believing friends and the way they've responded to it. I was concerned that I would alienate friends and family who are active believing members, but the response that I received from them has just been very kind and supporting as well. So I would mention that when I was in the dark night of the soul, and when I was, in the anger stage of grief, and unpacking and asking questions to try to figure out what was going on, there were some relationships with local friends who were believers that got stretched. But over time, those relationships have largely been mended. They're not the same as they were when we were both active believers, but to a great extent, I've been able to rebuild and reconstruct relationships with a lot of those people that for a period of time were stretched when I was in my faith crisis. And so I hold grace that those who reacted called me the apostate, spread rumors that, I must be stealing from my clients or cheating on my wife, maybe my wife should leave me kind of thing, that they were reacting probably out of concern or fear or disorientation or, based on what they've been taught or understood. Or it could be any other number of things. and I want to hold grace for the way they reacted. But I do want to say that those relationships are still important to me with many of those believing friends, and the kinds of feedback that I've got from those kinds of friends has been very positive also.
Beautiful. Well, good. Well, I can just say, as someone who's tried to hoe my own little row in the Mormon faith crisis kind of realm, that I it's hard to think of someone else who I'd rather be, trying to communicate their story or this kind of message in a TED Talk than you. So I'm just really happy that you got hopefully the first of what will be many people being able to share a talk like this. But it was certainly a fantastic one, and I'm honored to have it shared here. Let me ask you, Anthony, my guess is your work isn't done, that this is kind of just the beginning. I know that you've thought about writing a memoir or a book. I've heard you kind of brainstorm or noodle a little bit, maybe on a podcast or a YouTube channel. We always love having you participate here. But we also know that sometimes there's other ways to make big differences. So do you have any future plans that are starting to simmer that you would want to share with our audience?
Yeah, there are ongoing conversations that I would like to participate in and continue to participate on episodes on Mormon Stories and Mormon Discussion and other places too. But I've decided to go ahead and develop my own YouTube podcast channel, and hope to do joint episodes with you and other channels, as well as have conversations with people that for one reason or another it doesn't work for them to go on your channel or Bill's channel or whatnot, that I think that I would be important to the conversation. So for example, if someone's an employee of the church or something like that, I understand that there's a restriction that they're not supposed to go on your channel. So in any event, I've decided to go ahead and do that. I was writing a memoir, but came to the realization that I have people in my life who are very private people, and it would not be helpful to them or my relationships with them to do a memoir due to how private they are. And there's so much part of my story that I don't know how to do a memoir without including them in the story. So I'm still going to do a book. It's just not going to be an Amber Scora book or a Megan Phelps Roper or Mirva Torvis type of book. So.
Okay. Well, we'll take whatever Anthony Miller we can get.
All right. So it looks like we
so this is
because
the Facebook stream is great. The Facebook stream is great, and this will be released in audio format. So we should just have that. That's what this is, and that's going to be great for all the people that are able to check it out there. We'll embed this entire video, the Facebook version of this video, in the blog post, so the whole interview will carry on uninterrupted.
Oh, perfect. All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So any final words you want to share, let's just say to two groups. One would be to believing Mormons who just happen to tune in. Any advice you want to give to believing Mormons about how to support their loved ones who are in faith crisis? And then if you want to turn that around and give any final feedback to Mormons in faith crisis about how to consider navigating that. I know we can do entire episodes on this, and you have, and we will, but for those who are just joining us now, any final words first for believers?
I mean, to hold grace for people who are processing a faith transition, because it's often an experience of significant grief, and whether or not you agree with how people are reconciling or not difficult topics, whether they're church history or social cultural issues or things like that. These friends and family members of yours who are processing a faith transition, they are experiencing significant grief. So to the extent that you can help them and support them by sitting with them and expressing love to them, that's what's going to be most helpful to them. I'll share the experience. I have one friend who's very much an active, believing apologist, member of the church. He's written a book about Mormonism and the Apocrypha. His name is Ken. And I grew to become friends with Ken over time to the extent that when I've traveled down to the St. George area, my wife and I spent a long afternoon with him and his wife and had lunch together. And one thing that I expressed to Ken is that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to support other people as they're processing significant grief, as they're experiencing an identity crisis. Not everyone, everybody's journey is a little bit different, but it's common. And that sometimes when people are in severe grief and they're processing these things and people are reacting to them poorly, they're experiencing additional trauma to the extent that when people are experiencing severe trauma, they can do things that end up later regretting. Maybe they even blow up their lives. For a person to test behavioral boundaries, for example, when they're in college and they're single, that's different than when they're in their 40s and married with kids and they're processing severe grief and they decide to try drinking for the first time. So to the extent that we can help people and support them when they're processing these things, then we can relieve suffering. And one thing that Ken has expressed to me, and I don't think that he minds that I share this, is that even though we very much disagree on a lot of different things with regard to biblical scholarship and church history, what Ken has expressed is love and appreciation for me, and that he knows that people who are processing a faith transition, they need support to help relieve suffering and loneliness and grief. And so to the extent that you and I and other people can do things to help people who are processing that, he thinks that there's divinity in that. And I experience a sense of connection and transcendent grace in my being with participating in those things too. And for me, that's an example of a believer who can hold space for someone who's going through a faith transition, who's striving to make a positive difference in the world. For those who are processing a faith transition, I think it's helpful just to recognize that a lot of what we're experiencing is grief. A lot of what we're experiencing is deprogramming. So Luna Lindsay Corbden's book, Recovering Agency, for example, was extremely helpful to me in understanding what my experience was and why I was experiencing what I was experiencing. Brene Brown's work, other work that talks about existential crisis, processing grief, things like that, those things are very helpful as well. But one thing that I would express is that regardless of where we are in our faith transition, as we're moving forward and we're making choices in our life and we're pulling the best that we can from secular Buddhism, from Brene Brown, from poetry, art, from community, from whatever sources that we're drawing from that are feeding us and helping us to thrive and grow, to the extent that we can do things to move forward where our believing friends and family might call what they're experiencing with us the manifestation of the fruits of the Spirit in our life. We might not use those words if they're triggering for us. But if we're doing things where our believing family are experiencing spiritual connection with us, that's going to relieve some of their concerns as well, and it helps us move forward as well. Kyle Ashworth, in a discussion with him, he's explained that a faith crisis is like having a big oak tree in your front yard ripped from the ground, and it leaves a big hole in the front of your house. And if you don't plant something new, eventually over time, things accumulate in that hole where the tree was. And it can be a lot of garbage, or we can rework it and put in the work to create and grow something new there. And I love that analogy too. So there's hope for those of you who are early in your faith crisis or faith deconstruction process. But seek out community, seek out people who can sit with you in your journey, have patience and grace for yourself. John Larson once expressed that he felt like it took at least 1 year for every year someone was a fully active believing member to fully feel like yourself again. So for me as a 49-year-old, when I went through my faith crisis, that would mean 4 to 5 years. And sure enough, John Larson was right. It took about 4 to 5 years before I fully felt like myself again. It took about 18 months, plus or minus, to not routinely revisit the stages of grief on a regular basis. And that was with a lot of help from other people. And it took about 4 or 5 years for me to fully feel like myself again. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. So those are the things that I would share with post-Orthodox believers as well as believers.
I love it. I'll just add that Natasha Helfer and my wife Margie and I have been doing workshops and retreats for Mormons in Faith Crisis for, 10 years or more. And we've had so many positive responses, so many lives changed and helped by those events that we started a podcast called The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis, which can be found at MormonFaithCrisis.com, where we've provided 70 hours of free coaching on Mormon faith crisis issues, things like grieving, stages of grief, emotion regulation, healthy sexuality, how to communicate with believing family and friends, how to communicate with your kids after a faith crisis, rules for healthy marriage, values, creating new rituals. And I only mention all this because it's a resource that's free. There's so many people that can't afford coaching. There's so many people that don't know about these resources. And I've had many people tell me this content has saved their lives or changed their lives. We even, thanks to the generosity of Clint and Jenny Martin, we recorded an entire retreat, a Mormon Faith Crisis retreat with me, Natasha, and Margie. And we recorded the whole thing and shared the whole thing on the internet. So you can go to MormonFaithCrisis.com, search for the retreat there, and you can watch an entire weekend's retreat that doesn't just include, the stuff that I shared, that Margie shared, that Natasha shared. It shares all the participation of the retreat participants with high quality audio and video. It was an amazing investment of time and money and resources. And we know it helps people. So we're not doing many workshops or retreats these days. Maybe we'll bring them back at some point. But we do want those resources to be known and to be made available, because we've been trying to help people for a long time in this regard. And that's how I met you, right, Anthony?
That's right. That's how we met at one of your Faith Crisis workshops.
Yeah. All right. Well, we do have one viewer listener that has joined us, and it's Justin. And Justin is important for a lot of reasons, but he is important at least one reason, because he helped us create our Discord server, the MormonStories Discord server, which almost has 1,000 members at this point, and is an amazing resource for progressive and post-Mormons, Mormons in Faith Crisis that are looking to find friends, looking to chat with people, even do video chats, even to play games together. to create community. So Justin, thanks for joining us. Any reactions you want to share about Anthony's video or anything else you want to share?
Well, I just want to share, just want to say thank you, Anthony. I've actually met you at one of the Thrive events, and just getting to meet you and see that somebody who is well thought out and somebody who, for all intents and purposes, feels like somebody I would meet at church and see as like a good member, that they too can look at the stuff that I've seen and be like, there's an issue here. It validated my experience. And so I appreciate that. And I look forward to finishing the rest of your TED Talk. Also, per Discord, one of the things that's really helped me in my transition is the content that John made on Gifted the Mormon Faith Crisis. And people like to consume things different ways. For some people, Discord won't be for them, and that's fine. Though it really is neat because we link to that. You can get it on John's site, but then we have special channels where you can stream that content. And we even have a community around there. If you need to talk to somebody like real time about that, if you just need a friend, we have Faith Crisis like chat rooms or even video chat rooms where you can talk to somebody right now if you're having a rough time or a rough day. We're not therapists. We're just friends, and we're just here to, validate you. Sometimes people refer to burn it all down, and that it's important to pay attention to that anger that sometimes we have. But there are important or better ways to manage the anger that we feel, like Mr. Rogers used to tell us. And so as a community, we're there to, help you feel heard and validated through those angry phases so that you can maintain those relationships and gain tools around maintaining those relationships through some of John's content that we syndicate. So definitely feel free to drop in if it's your jam. If not, there's Thrive and all sorts of other things. But this is something that's really helped me through my process, like being there and helping other people. So
thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Anthony. I appreciate it. And thank you, John.
My pleasure. Thanks, Justin, to all your work and to everyone else who helps you run and moderate the Discord server. We will share a link in the show notes to the retreat, and we will also share a link in the show notes to the Discord channel. But you can also find the Discord channel just by Discord server. Sorry, not channel, Discord server. You can find a link to that if you go to MormonStories.org, and in the top left, there are a bunch of like social media buttons, and one of them is the Discord. And you can click on the Discord link, and it'll take you to the server. So
one more thing I want to touch on is that Anthony brought up that sometimes, like if you're working at church headquarters and you feel alone, you can't talk to anybody, you don't want to lose your job. One great thing about Discord is you can manage your identity a lot easier. So if you're not ready to come out, we have a lot of people who listen to Mormon Stories who go by like these fun nicknames on the server, and you can go at your own pace. You don't even have to talk in voice chats. So you can manage it if it's not safe for you to fully be out. So show up. I use my name in my picture. Say hi. I'm there to be a friend if you need one.
That's pretty cool. That's a good resource.
Yeah, we'd love to have you on sometime, Anthony, and hear more from you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Great to have you.
Bye.
I also want to mention, and this is something that's been important to you, Anthony, is that over the years, there have been directories made to help people find a local community near them. So the one that's been created most recently is the Thrive community map. If you want to find a community in Ogden or Cache Valley or St. George or Phoenix or Boise or DC or even London, one website you can go to is thrivebeyondreligion.com and /groups. And there you can find a list of a bunch of Thrive groups that have been created. They're free and they're active. And that's one way to find community. And then a long time ago, I worked with several friends to create another directory of in-person support groups at Mormon Spectrum. So you can go to mormonspectrum.org and then click on the MSIP map. It's the Mormon Spectrum in-person map, basically. And that's where I went to find the Billings, Montana group, because it wasn't obviously available, wasn't immediately clear how to find that on Facebook. But that's where you can find the Faith Journey Meetups group for post-Mormon women, the WACA, Worldwide Women of a Certain Age group for women 40 and above. That also includes women under 40, and so many other cool support groups. Anthony, do you want to say anything about those in-person, face-to-face support groups?
I mean, they're probably one of the most important part, at least for how I'm built, was to have in-person support. I mean, it was one thing to have Facebook support groups and other online resources, which were really helpful, but to have someone sit with me in person, listen to my story, and for us to basically minister to other people by sitting with people and their stories, there's just something very powerful about being in person. Oh, there is another, in addition to these other groups, on Ex-Mormon Reddit, there's a pinned post for weekend or virtual meetups that gets updated every week. And so if you're visiting a place that has a lot of members of the church, like Utah, there's probably some sort of a Saturday or Sunday weekend meetup even that you can usually go and attend there too.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Anthony. Like, just the Ex-Mormon Reddit group is an amazing group with, well, is it over 200,000 members at this point? And it is the largest ex-religious community on Reddit. 237,000 ex-Mormons at this point. Right now, there's 1.4 thousand members of the ex-Mormon Reddit there checking out what's being posted. And one of the benefits of participating on the Ex-Mormon Reddit is that you don't have to use your real name. On Facebook, you use your real name. And on some of the other platforms, people can kind of easily dox you or find out who you are. But the Ex-Mormon Reddit community, like on Twitter, I guess, you can participate anonymously. And there's positives and negatives to that. But overall, the Ex-Mormon Reddit is for sure one of the most important communities in all of ex-Mormonism. So we'll include a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, Anthony, you're a treasure. We're so grateful you would again come on Mormon Stories. Any final thoughts you want to share?
No, I just really appreciate for the opportunity to do this episode today, and I hope that my TEDx talk is helpful for people. We'll figure out how to edit it or whatever so that you can do a YouTube video, I would hope, to upload.
Well, they won't.
To the
I don't
channel.
think they'll let me share your full TEDx video.
Maybe you could just share 5 minutes of it or 3 minutes of it, and then throw in an edit saying, if you want to watch the rest of it, go here.
Something like that, yeah. But if people want to watch it, they should go to your link. And so let's end by that. Let's just make sure that people can watch it directly, because there's a real value in having the view count on these TEDx videos kind of get high. Like Lance Allred's TEDx talk called "What is Your Polygamy?" received millions of views. My TEDx talk on being an LGBT Mormon ally has probably got a couple 100,000. But we want these to get as many views as possible. So I'm gonna share a direct link to your TED Talk right now in the Facebook comments, and we'll include that in the show notes. And we'll just encourage everybody to both click on it, click on the link, watch it yourself, and then share it with the gazillion people. Personally, I'd rather you share Anthony's original TEDx talk than the Mormon Stories links to the TED Talk. I think you'd agree with that, right?
I think it'll affect a lot of people, and there'll be more views if people go to the TED website or to the YouTube channel for TEDx.
Yeah. All right, Anthony, you're the best. Thanks for all your support. Thanks for your support of me and of Mormon Stories over the years. And we would love to collaborate with you whenever you have something that's worthy.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Anthony, take care, brother.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone again for joining us today on Mormon Stories podcast. We love having you. Please share Anthony's link to his TED Talk with as many people as you can. Please, we welcome your comments and feedback at mormonstories@gmail.com or in the Facebook stream or on YouTube when we have one. You can also go to our blog at mormonstories.org and make comments there. And we really appreciate when you follow us on TikTok at Mormon Stories Podcast or Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. That makes a big difference in the social media algorithms. And of course, we couldn't do this without your financial support. So if you want to join like the 1,500 or so donors, we have well over 100,000 viewers and listeners every year, and about 1,000 to 1,500 donate every year, if my memory is correct. We would love to have those of you who value this content become supporters. So you can go to MormonStories.org, click on the donate button above, and become a monthly donor. We're transparent in our finances. We publish our 990s every year after the IRS makes them public. It's tax deductible in the U.S. And every dollar you donate, we work really hard to make sure it goes towards, informed consent within Mormonism, with people investigating the church, with people in the church, but also supporting people in transition and helping people who have to leave Mormonism find healing and growth on the other end. Our goal on Mormon Stories has always been to save families, to prevent divorce, to heal anxiety and depression, and to just bring light and truth and healing to the world. So we're going to keep doing that for as long as you'll support us. So please do so. Again, you can also find a local community either at thrivebeyondreligion.com or at mormonspectrum.org, or you can start your own, and you can go to those websites to find out how to do that. So thanks for all the support, everybody. Love you. Please be good to each other. Please be kind to each other. And thanks for your support. And just we have many, many good episodes in the works in the coming weeks, months, and years ahead. So we hope you'll join us again soon on another episode of Mormon Stories Podcast. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you soon.